Hi, good morning. This is RN Bhaskar from BKBB, which is an acronym for Bhaskar Ki Business Baatein. Bhaskar Ki Business Baatein is an older channel which deals with policy analysis, stories, conversation, one every week. BKBB is a new avatar. Today is the 23rd episode. And every morning at 8:15, we try to bring you some headlines that we think are very important. And we analyze that and try to see what more it offers. And that is why we call this program News Behind the News. And as always, we look at international developments, we look at India. While focused on India, we don't forget the international developments. And we are on a day when some people are celebrating Eid, while at the same time, you have the massacre of people going on even on a festival day, on a holy day. You have this you have the beginnings of the Trump tariff season, and you have repercussions the world over. And that is where I want to start my news item, given this international parameter, these international developments in the background. But before that, could I remind you to please click the subscribe button if you have not done so already. Click the like button. It tells us what is it that you like, what is it that you don't like. But most importantly, tell your friends about us. We could do with a larger audience. We think we're doing things that every Indian should pay attention to. When you look at the news, before we look at the news, let's look at the three titles. One thing. Before that, let me introduce my co-anchor to you. I've got Isha here with me. Welcome, Isha, to the show. And today we are going to discuss three titles. And the three titles are, interestingly, what I told you about, that we're talking about tariff turmoil and how it escalates. We're talking about MPCB, Maharashtra Pollution Control Board, and its denial that water bodies are shrinking. And we have Maharashtra, which advertises tall claims. Effectively, we are talking about Maharashtra more today, but let's begin with the global and the Indian scene. The first article, the first story that we'll be doing is how the US government has released the USTR report, the United States Trade Regulator, the trade regulatory body. It came out to the report saying that India was the worst performer as far as duties go. It is one of the highest import duties. Why was it released just now, when discussions on zero tariffs between India and USA were supposed to begin? Clearly, USA wanted to rub India's nose into the ground to remind it that no concessions will be offered to India and that India will have to abide by US norms and tariffs. The velvet is off. The hard knuckles are visible, and India will have to decide whether it wants to kowtow to the US once again, like it has done in the past, or whether it can find alternatives very quickly. Markets, they were in a turmoil because everyone knows that today the tariffs are going to take effect. And very interestingly, Indian banks have started revising all the norms for student loans. In the past, a student could get his loans for studies in the US. But if your visa gets revoked and you're sent back home, the loan becomes riskier. So all the banks are busy looking at country profiles and finding out which loans are risky, and that looking at all the regulations that apply to student loans. Clearly, the Trump tariff has a little more distance to go, and the pain will be felt in the markets, in countries, and with the banks. Do remember that in the last few days, Denmark and Canada have boycotted US goods. Much of EU is likely to start boycotting US goods as well. China, South Korea, Japan have joined hands to find out a common way to deal with these tariffs that the US wants to impose. Russia said Putin has made a public address some time ago to his industrialists that he does not expect sanctions to be lifted. He does not expect the West to have any solution for Russia, and Russia and the rest of the world will have to work together. Effectively, Putin was also saying that now BRICS becomes more important than the Western world. The Western world is a past star, a forgotten era, and must be forgotten as quickly as possible. Let's see how it turns out. And that takes us to the second story, where Isha is going to talk about MPCB and water bodies. Isha, over to you.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for joining in. Hope you're having a great start to the day. The story I'm bringing you today is from The Hindu and it's titled Maharashtra Pollution Control Board Does Not Accept That Water Bodies Are Dying, Says Fishing Community. So, traditional fishermen have moved the High Court against the industrial pollution that is killing marine life in Navi Mumbai, killing the ecosystem and fish, therefore destroying their livelihood. In response to this, on February 6th, the Maharashtra Pollution Control Board conducted a field visit to the Diwali Creek in Navi Mumbai and collected water samples to test in the laboratory. On March 4th, the results of these tests showed figures of pollutants and minerals, all well below the detectable limit, the exact figures of which are visible on your screen towards the left hand side. However, when the members of the Maharashtra Small Scale Traditional Fishing Workers Union conducted a water sample analysis on the Diwali and Nava Sheva Creek on the 24th of March, only 20 days after the results of the Maharashtra Pollution Control Board were released, they did this test privately through Atlas Labs, and the figures that were revealed through this test told a completely different story. So you can see the exact figures on the right hand side of your screen. But according to these tests, the appearance of water samples was grey, and they had a lot of suspended particles which hadn't really dissolved into the water. These figures were starkly different from those produced by the MPCB report, with total dissolved solids being found at 20,998 milligram per liter, far exceeding the limit of 2,100 milligram per liter and almost 300 times that revealed by MPCB's test. Furthermore, the amount of fecal contamination, which puts us at a risk for waterborne illnesses, was found to be over 2.5 times the limit for water pollution. The MPCB officials did not respond to the differences in the report. And the members of the Maharashtra Small Scale Traditional Fish Workers Union wrote to the state government, fisheries department, environmental department, Konkan and Raigad district administration numerous times, raising concerns over the dead marine life, but all in vain. The MPCB refuses to accept that the water bodies are dying, leaving the fishermen who have relied on these waterways for their livelihood for generations struggling for sustenance as the marine ecosystem dies. Furthermore, these creeks are also home to migratory birds whose numbers will be affected by the lack of food and the toxic water. This is a very sad story. Our waterways are dying, and nothing is really being done about it. Lot to think about, lot to do. But that's all from my side. Thank you for tuning in. I'd love to hear your comments on this, sir.
Isha, you raised a very, very crucial point about water bodies. And it is very sad to see MPCB give out figures which are at variance with actual figures taken and tested in private labs. This means three things. One, MPCB did not do the test properly. Two, it took them to laboratories that did not do the analysis carefully. And three, it has not bothered to counter the results that the fisher folk have brought before the MPCB. It points to irresponsibility on the part of MPCB. As for the denial that water bodies are dying, MPCB should be asked, what about the Jal Shivers that have been constructed over the last 4 years, where the state government realized that water bodies were dying, and that is why they want to have these little shivers, these little artificial lakes, so that groundwater reserves can be pushed up. You mean the government is lying at that time? Or is MPCB trying to push us on the wrong path? Do you remember the arguments that we had in the assembly about mangroves dying? And you say there were no suspended particles? I mean, if you look at what has happened, the state government pronouncements about Jalyuk Shivers And also the what do you call it, mangroves dying, they run contrary to most of MPCB's claims. Something must be done to bring about greater responsibility when giving out figures and giving out statements. And that takes me to the third story, which is also about Maharashtra. Again, it's a story about false claims, about exaggerated claims. Maharashtra claims that it's got the highest level of investment proposals in the March quarter. Let the Maharashtra government go back to the last 5 years and look at the difference between investment proposals and actual investments on the ground. You want investment proposals, you'll get them. Actual investments on the ground require a lot of planning, both by the state government and the central government. Investments are not taking place because both parties are whimsical and capricious in the way they approach legislation. Look at the number of proposals that come in. The largest proposals are for power projects. What is the use of a power project proposal if there are no industries to take up that power? If you don't have industries, the power project will only cater to almost zero cost power supply to farmers and increase the state deficit. So, making claims that we've got the largest amount of investments, the largest number of investment proposals ever, is a great thing to enthuse the masses. The reality is quite different. Maharashtra needs to gear up. And Maharashtra has a problem on many fronts. Like you pointed out in a recent podcast and in a recent article, Maharashtra has a problem of less water and more sugarcane, which leads to farmer suicides. That is another thing that Maharashtras look at. Don't talk about investments. Talk about strengthening the economy. Maharashtra's economy is slipping badly. It needs to pull itself up by the bootstraps. That in turn takes me to the end of today's session. And do remember, you have to click the subscribe button. We'd like you to click the like button and inform your friends about our channel. And also, when you can, put in questions in the chat box, because we will try replying and responding to some of the questions. I can see 3 questions that have come up already. What are the alternatives for India in the face of Trump's tariff? It's a question that has been answered earlier too. India should immediately become more active with ASEAN and not approach ASEAN with arrogance. Hitherto, ministers have gone to ASEAN and have been imperious just because they're smaller countries. They're smaller countries with larger exports, larger economies, richer people. Have a little bit of respect for money. ASEAN has shown it can grow faster than the European countries, than G7, and certainly faster than India too. And that is why the first thing India has to do is realign its trade priorities away from the West, away from New Zealand, which seems to have a special fascination for some ministers, and look at ASEAN. That is where the market is. That is where the exports are. And look at Africa. Look at Latin America. Develop those continents. The West is not going to provide the solutions that India is looking for. There's a second question about water pollution. Is water pollution serious? Read the Godbole report on the sensitivity of the Western Ghats. And there you'll find that Godbole talks about how in some industrial areas, people have actually been putting pollutants into the ground so that they don't have to create septic tanks to clean up the pollutants. And MPCB in Maharashtra especially does not look at an input-output norm ratio. If I use so much of raw material, how much of effluent will I normally create? And if I've reported less than the normal effluent, which has to go to the septic tanks and to the cleanup areas, then I'm concealing figures. In Maharashtra, there are many units which actually drill a hole in the ground and put the effluents into the ground, contaminating groundwater reserves. Pollution is there. Just because it's not visible does not mean it is not there. It means someone is cheating, not someone, but many more people are cheating. Okay, there's a third question that's come up, and that is Maharashtra is an industry leader. So why is Maharashtra not becoming better at industrial growth? To have industrial growth, the government, the politicians, especially the leaders, need to have vision, need to have a plan, and need to adhere to the plan. But when ministers themselves start promoting communal disharmony, when ministers themselves start promoting tall claims here and there, you will not have industrial growth. To have industrial growth, you have to have vision, you have to have tenacity, you have to draw plans which must be treated as sacrosanct. I hope Maharashtra does it. It's got a great past. Please make it a great future. Don't make people regret the decisions and the sins of commission and omission of today. Anyway, that brings me to the end of today's podcast. Thank you for being with us. And do watch us tomorrow, 8:15 in the morning, and tell your friends about us. Take care. Have a wonderful day. Good luck.